How do we determine aesthetic value? In the philosophy of Shuzo Kuki, we understand that value is determined based upon the cultural aesthetic principle of iki, which in its English translation means attachment. Shuzo, influenced by the phenomenological tradition preceded by Martin Heidegger and founded by Edmund Husserl, we begin to understand the texture of Shuzo's philosophy. In his work, Iki no Kuzo, Shuzo investigates the concept of iki and its contingent relationship to the epoch of Edo Jidai, along with its subordinate Yukio social culture. Through this, Shuzo creates a bricolage between various concepts as they relate to the transcendental signified of iki. In this video, I will elaborate on two of the comparative binaries, Hade and Shimi, and how they manifest themselves in cultural phenomenon, particularly Yukio culture. In the 1920s, Shuzo studied abroad in Germany at the University of Freiburg, mentored by philosopher Martin Heidegger. While there, Shuzo started to understand the difference between cultural perception, as he was a Japanese man in a majority ethnic German cultural landscape. From here, he started to partner on the concept of identity as it related to aesthetic phenomenology. His aesthetic phenomenology, greatly influenced by Heideggerian phenomenology, was iki, or detachment in English. In iki, Shuzo created an aesthetic judgment based around the uniqueness of the Japanese identity, particularly its historical era of Edo. For in the Edo Jidai, there was a strong sense of cultural decadence, as opposed to the warring Sengoku Jidai. Iki as an aesthetic principle puts emphasis on detachment from the material world while actively engaging in it. This contradiction is actualized in the flirtatious nature of Edo social life, mainly between male and female. Philosopher Shuzo uses the English term coterie to articulate Edo's distinct social sensibilities. The main concern of coterie, in the essence of pleasure, is maintaining a dualistic relationship, that is to say, protecting the possibility of impossibility. For Shuzo, the inherent antinomy of the word coterie preserves potentiality and freedom. This lays bare the cultural context of Edo, for which pleasure and freedom barred against each other in the melange of decadence. As mentioned previously in my video on Japanese film semiotics, Yukio is a concept that correlates to the decadence of the Edo Jidai. Yukio, which meaning in English is floating world, accurately represents the transient and hedonistic nature of Edo cultural life. Edo culture was influenced greatly by the social political conditions of the late Sengoku Jidai, with the remnants of warlord Oda Nobunaga's administration fighting over the power of the shogun. The factualization between two major clans, Toyotomi and Tokugawa, climaxed at the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600. The previous administration, Toyotomi Hideyoshi's, established the social political structure of the Edo state through the legal transformations of the royal Kambaku, a title reserved for the nobility in the imperial court. Hideyoshi was given the title Kambaku by the emperor through a legal loophole. He was not of noble birth and had to be adopted by a Kambaku from the Fujiwara nobility. During his tenure as Kambaku, he centralized the power of the military within the civil state, while also reconstructing the economic and social relationships of the population with his Taikyo Kinchi land reforms of the late Sengoku era. These reforms aimed at centralizing the power of the state by removing the autonomy of the local daimyos and samurai and forcing them to sequester within the confines of the nation's capital, Kyoto. This laid the foundations for the Kodata system, the basis for social context in Yukio. In Iki no Kuzo, Shuzo expands on the Iki aesthetic by attaching binaries to the concept. In this schema, Shuzo constructs a matrix of signifiers through a spectrum as they relate towards Iki. For this reason, the binaries of Hade and Shimi are paired against each other to emphasize the pureness of Iki as a prime aesthetic value in Yukio culture. These binaries, Shuzo argued, represented the aesthetic extremes in respect to the attributes associated to them. For Hade, Shuzo proposed the flashiness and flamboyant style as Yabo, or boorish in its English translation. For Yabo was considered unsophisticated and shows traits of a rural social background. Shimi, on the other hand, represented the subtleties and applied actions of style and dress. This was associated with the aristocracy of the Edo Jidai. For to be associated with Shimi was to be close to the ideal of Iki. The opposition between these binaries had a cultural historical context, as these terms were associated to adjacent rulers in their respective eras. For in Hade, Shujo observed, was present in the Shigoku Jidai's Kenpaku Toriomi Hideyoshi. Hideyoshi, a man who came from humble beginnings, often dressed in an ostentatious way to make up for his peasant background, while his successor, Ieyasu Tokugawa, was an aristocrat stemming from the Minamoto clan, the founders of the shogunate during the Heian era. On the face of it, it seems to be that these concepts are inherently opposed to each other, but in the cultural life of Yukio, the synthesis of these two concepts can be seen in the phenomenon Ediko. Ediko, as a concept, was a contradiction of behaviors played out within an individual. For the Ediko, nobility and valor were considered high virtues. However, the Ediko was not from an exclusively aristocratic background. The Ediko consumed and cultivated the Yoki art form of woodbark prints, being the main material expression of the Iki aesthetic. Shujo further elaborates on the Yoki as the principal art form of the Edo Jidai in his observations of the period's most influential artist, Okamura Masanobu. In Okamura Masanobu's work, Sento no Joshi, the focus in the painting is a group of women after attending a public bath. Shujo argues through the occupation of the after image of the bathing that Iki shines through, particularly due to the fact that the focus on the slenderness of the female's body contraposes the tenseness of the facial features presented on the female's faces. This contradiction, Shujo argues, illuminated the inherent antagonism of potentiality and freedom inherent in the Iki aesthetic, as these contradictions showcase the courteous behavior women in Edo Jidai communicated to opposite sex, always playful, never at full consummation. Shuzo Kuki was the first philosopher in modern Japanese philosophy to articulate an aesthetic principle that was outside the influence of the dominant Western philosophical culture tradition that occupied the minds of the Japanese intellectual culture of the late Meiji Jidai and the forthcoming Tashio. Because of this, Kuki's influence is understated in Japanese intellectual history and on a broader scale, global culture. Thank you for your time and have a great day.
I feel so funny these days. I'd rather sleep than stay